This is the Mormon Mixed Faith Marriage Podcast with certified life coach Brooke Booth, episode number 114. Okay, I've got another vulnerable podcast for you today where I share some of my own personal experiences of being in a mixed faith marriage. Now, if you're like me, what you seek in a marriage, now this is whether it's my same faith marriage or my mixed faith marriage or my marriage yet to come, I'm seeking connection. And as I have been doing this work, I've been able to identify one of the big roadblocks stopping me from experiencing connection. Now, this roadblock existed prior to my faith transition, prior to our mixed faith marriage, but the mixed faith marriage and sort of stirring things up helped me to identify it in a way that I couldn't really identify before. And this roadblock that I'm referencing, this roadblock to connection, is what I call fitting in versus belonging. Now, this is an idea that I've cribbed from Glennon Doyle's podcast where she was referencing Brene Brown's work. So it's a little bit of a history here, but I'm going to use my own words here and my own ideas as I talk about how I interpreted what they were talking about here and how I applied it to myself, this idea of fitting in versus belonging. So belonging is so similar to that connection I was talking about earlier. Belonging is that deep connection, that intimacy that we seek in a relationship. When somebody really knows you and sees you and accepts you fully, and they see exactly who you are and they say yes, like without any reservations, they say, I'll take it. That looks good to me. I'll have one of those. Belonging is, I guess, like what I was talking about with connection, it's that thing we want. For me specifically, it's that thing I really wanted. The interesting thing about belonging is that it can really only be experienced when you show up authentically as like the real version of you. If you're holding back a part of yourself, or people pleasing, or from fear, or whatever habit it is, whatever reason you hold back, it creates the feeling of not belonging because you know that the real you is not being seen, accepted, and loved in this relationship. And this is where it's interesting, is we want belonging desperately. I do, for sure. So that we can really be accepted for who we are. But in our efforts to seek and find and experience belonging, what we often do is fit in. And fitting in is not the same as belonging. They are very different things. Fitting in often thwarts our efforts, our desire to belong. Now, a lot of times fitting in happens because of our desire to belong, but it can also often thwart that actually happening. I'm going to tell you how this looked for me. I'm going to give you an example from my own experience of fitting in versus belonging so you can understand what I'm talking about here. So when I talk about fitting in, oops, I'm clanging around here. I call this version of myself the fitting in version. I call it Daniel's wife. So my husband's name is Daniel. So Daniel's wife wanted to belong. And in her efforts to belong, she developed the skill set of fitting in. She wanted to fit in to that good wife, that good Relief Society sister, that good daughter, that good daughter-in-law. She wanted to fit in because she wanted to belong. But fitting in, again, is different than belonging. So I studied what it looked like to fit in. I molded myself to become her. So I saw that she did personal progress, so I did personal progress. I saw she went to BYU, so I went to BYU. She served a mission. She got married. She had kids. Okay, so I would do those things too in my effort to fit in. And once I was married, I studied what it looked like to be that good LDS wife, that mother, and I molded myself to be her, to fit into who she was. I had 4 kids. I served with my heart and soul in my callings. I didn't pursue work outside the home at first, all in my efforts to belong, which was really just my efforts to fit in. hear me, nothing's wrong with doing all of those things. However, I was doing them to fit in as I was seeking belonging. I was doing them to fit in. And most of all, I wanted to fit in into my marriage. So I would pick up the cues and ideas I would hear from my spouse about what type of person, what kind of person he wanted to be married to, and I'd mold myself into her. And unfortunately, this wasn't always in alignment with who I actually was, like with me. I was pretending to be somebody else so I could fit in and therefore belong. So, in my efforts to belong in my marriage, I pretended to be somebody I was not. So, I struggled to feel like I actually belong because I really knew deep down I was only fitting in and I wasn't actually belonging. I know there were parts of me I wasn't bringing to the table, so I couldn't feel belonging because I was really just fitting in. So, for example, I got the cue to be soft, to speak softly. So I dropped my more frank, bold approach as much as I possibly could. I was trying so hard to fit into what I thought Daniel's wife should be, that good wife, that LDS woman. In the process, I abandoned Brooke. I had not achieved belonging because Brooke was not belonging or present in the marriage. What started to cue me into this is years after I had been married, like years, maybe 8, 9, 10. My sister commented that I had changed after I got married. Now, at the time she said this, I was highly confused. I didn't really know what she was referencing. But what I was really doing is I was trying so hard to be so good and so right that I wasn't actually being me. Now, I thought that was a good thing. I thought I was, putting off the natural man and becoming a saint. But in reality, what I was doing was fitting in. And it was robbing me of my sense of belonging in the relationship. And what's interesting is despite fitting in and all this effort for years and years and years, as the years passed, I felt and experienced less and less belonging despite all my efforts to fit in. Now, my faith transition was a tipping point for fitting in with the church, but my mixed faith marriage really helped me show me where I was fitting in my marriage as opposed to belonging. My mixed faith marriage helped show me how I had tried to fit in as Daniel's wife and abandoned Brooke, and therefore really lost my chance to belong. So a lot of the work I've been doing since then, and I'm doing still now, is to reclaim Brooke. Again, to bring her back into the relationship, to create belonging by allowing her to show up, allowing Brooke to show up, and to let Daniel's wife take a step back. Now, this process is not easy. There's so much fear of rejection, fear of, I'm not going to be liked, not going to be appreciated, that the real me isn't who Daniel wants. And that's all natural and normal. But what I remind myself a lot too is there's so much to gain in terms of belonging, in terms of really showing up as Brooke and having a relationship where Brooke is being seen, known, experienced, and Brooke is being welcome and allowed in this relationship so she can actually experience belonging. When I was in my fitting in phase, like she fit in great. She was really good at fitting in as Daniel's wife. But what I want from this marriage, and I suspect you want from yours, is you don't want to just fit in. You want to belong. And in order to belong, you have to do this scarier, deeper work of showing up as who you are instead of pretending to be somebody to fit in a marriage. Now, some of you may not have this problem. Some of you very naturally and easily do show up as who you are. And great. Like that is perfect. I'm very, very happy for you. But I know there are some of you like me who have replaced a lot of their intimacy in their marriage with just fitting in for probably very similar reasons to me, or maybe different reasons. But whatever your reasons are, I want you to consider that fitting in is never going to actually create belonging for you. And if you do want to experience that belonging where you truly are seen for who you are and accepted for who you are, then you're going to have to show up as who you are and not just fit in and mold yourself into fitting into being somebody you're not. Again, super scary, super uncomfortable to do this type of work, but also so much potential upside, so much to gain in terms of belonging. Now, I'll tell you how this has been going for me. As I step more into being Brooke and less into being Daniel's wife, I find that one, yes, it's very uncomfortable. I have to remind myself the reasons why I'm doing it regularly, and I have to give myself that gentle encouragement very regularly. Sometimes I step back into being Daniel's wife. Sometimes I do that. And then I have to remind myself and encourage myself to go back and encourage Brooke to come back out. And when Brooke does come back out, and sometimes she says kind of crazy stuff, not bad crazy, but she's just a little bit more outspoken. She's a little bit more irreverent. She's a little bit more spunky than Daniel's wife ever was. I have to not beat myself up for who she is, for who she's showing up as. Now, she's not rude. She's not just being mean, but she's just a little bit more irreverent than Daniel's wife. And I have to be very gentle with myself to allow her to show up as who she is. Because it's time for my marriage for more belonging and less fitting in. Now, if this is something you're also working on, you're working on doing less fitting in and more belonging, if you need some support with that, feel free to reach out. Coaching is often a really powerful tool to see why we're fitting in versus belonging. What's the reason behind that? What are the belief systems behind that? So that we can deconstruct those and put them aside and create a new system, one based more on belonging and connection than just fitting in. Okay, if you need help, feel free to reach out to me at brookeboothcoaching.com and you can get one of my free consults. We can talk for an hour and see what's going on in your mixed faith marriage. All right, wishing you the best.